I want to warmly welcome you to this conversation with history.
Thank you very much.
It is such a great honor to be talking to you. I mean, in the wake of how Nigeria is today, how far we've come. There's so many young people who are not in touch with history. And it would be nice to put this record straight. First, we'll start off with the formation of the Boys Company. What informed that formation?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It is an honor to be privileged to talk on myself. But firstly, to be pleasantly honored to be interviewed by such pretty journalists, because in the past I went through hell to speak to a pretty woman. I was shy and very reluctant, but now I'm getting it free of charge.
I'm blushing.
Well, the 14-year-old boys of then Lieutenant Colonel Wellington Umo Bassi. He hailed from Calabar, and he was the first commissioned officer from the Army, then West African Frontier Force. His mandate was to recruit 30 boys who were children of veterans of the Second World War. He went around the country and recruited us. I was then in the Army Children's School in Zaria. And my father was a police officer in the police barracks in Zaria then. He had been transferred from Kaduna to Zaria, where we lived for many years. But as at 1954, I had moved from where I was in primary school, Sabongari Zaria Roman Catholic School, for some primary years, and then to Chikaji Zaria Roman Catholic School, St. Patrick's. The other one in Sabongari was St. Teresa's. From St. Patrick's, I went to the training depot, Army Children's School. I think my father heard that they will be recruiting children and veterans, and he wanted to make sure that I was near enough not to miss it. Many of us had served in the Second World War, many people from the tribe, and many have continued to serve in the military. So there I was, recruited as one of perhaps the smallest boy of that age, because I remember in the boys' company I was so small and thin that they used to call me Mosquito when we play football. When I strike, it's as if my opponents instantly caught malaria. And I was today, they call what I played, the positions I played is either number 9 or number 10. And though slim, I could jump high and head the ball into the goal. Our first years in the military school consisted of making habitable the barracks in Zaria that was allotted and previously occupied by the British non-commissioned officers. They're called the NCO.
What were the cardinal lessons you learned from that experience, in school back then?
We learned a lot. Firstly, we were being educated. We had very good teachers. Some of our teachers were expatriates from England, serving their their compulsory military service, which they do for 2 years. So they were young, talented officers of the rank of lieutenant from the United Kingdom. And we also had very senior Nigerians as our teachers. In fact, the boys' company was like the first military establishment that got into the budget of Nigeria, because way back then we were still heckling under the yoke of colonialism.
What informed the formation of the boys' company?
We were made to understand that the purpose was to raise a crop of educated soldiers, in contrast to the soldiers who were recruited by the British to serve them during the Second World War, or before that too, in conquering Nigeria, which started with the Hausa Constabularies and then West African Frontier Force. Most of those soldiers were illiterates.
What was the mandate of that group, that 30-member group of the boys' company?
And we were thought that we should think of becoming leaders as NCOs, non-commissioned officers, or warrant officers, or commissioned officers. So we got very ambitious because we didn't like to be like our fathers who served the British, barefooted with potir and monkey jackets and cummerbunds and Moroccan caps.
I want to believe that even that time, that era was also had its own peculiar challenges. What would you say were the challenges back then?
I think from January 1966, when we had the first military coup led by Nziogo, those of us who were in it began to feel that loyalty had gone astray. Unbelievably, the conscience, the loyalty, and the discipline of military subordinates had been broken. Regionalism and ethnicism or tribalism and exploitation of discipline and loyalty had come to the forefront of inquiry and of performance by subordinate soldiers within the military, before which there were no questioning of orders by subordinates before obeying. So there was the incipient breakdown of the traditional known military strength born out of unity, obedience, patriotism, and commitment.
Could you give us a sense of the security apparatus or the architecture back then?
Well, the security then and its architecture suited the colonial administration. We were under the British system of indirect rule. So we had the emirs and the native authorities at the helm of affairs over the generality of the people. And the British supplemented that with their own rules and acts that made the Nigerian constitution under their administration, and under a governor general for the whole Nigeria. And at one time, or at least at that time, there were subordinate governors in Ibadan, and the Enugu, because they were regions. And the politics had started emerging seriously, because the year before that, remember, Nahoro made the motion for self-government. And it didn't go well with the northern region, that chose that since they were not prepared, they will wait until 1957 or thereabouts to seek for the self-government. But generally, the British had the Nigerian police, they had the army. Look at, of course, there's a famous name in our history. It treated the Nigerian police as over and above the native authority police that existed in the regions. And they moved the Nigerian capitals, Calabar to Lagos, Lagos to, I think, Kogi State, Lokoja, then to Minna, then to Kaduna, then to Lagos. These are constitutional changes that were taking place, creating representatives here and then. But by 1954, I think there was a firm three-legged regions and the federal capital in Lagos as the Eastern region, Western region, Northern region. And they had tremendous powers, political powers, which they acquired over many, after challenging the colonial powers from the time of national consciousness and nationalism after the Second War, where in America there was the liberation of the slave, and consequently they had entered the throes of civil rights. And for we in Africa, there was growing nationalism. So we knew the framework of politics and of security. And democracy was in its embryo when they started the search for independence through self-governance of the various entities. Unfortunately, the Nigerian entity then was not a balanced entity, because the northern region was almost 2/3 of lands as compared to the western and the eastern regions. And that imbalance had produced its own consequences after independence.
Would you say the colonial masters, set us up for failure?
They have set us up such that they will continue to benefit from our territories. So they had their national interest in maintaining what will keep us under their influence as suppliers of natural resources and suppliers of subordinate status to them in the world fair. So their interest was to maintain influence over the state of things in Nigeria, such that the acquired benefits would not dissipate or disappear. The trial period before independence of democracy, of course, produced what looked like a skewed democracy, because the people were not really free at that time. Under the indirect rule, the native authorities were manned, governed, and influenced by the traditional overheads in the kingdoms that existed and in the chiefdoms that existed. Therefore, democracy in its, at that time in its embryo were influenced greatly by the structure of government then. In fact, the initial representatives were people who were put forward by the various native authorities or kings or monarchs, generally traditional rulers. So the representatives were not seriously on a party political basis. That gave rise to the predominant party, for example, in the north, putting forward most people and leaders who were supported by the traditional rulers. And there were few people who were truly engaged as labor in the colonial system. But there was a predominance engagement of people in their farms, peasantry and farming for existence. But they are mostly under the powerful traditional rulers as peasants and as workers. Some of them very close to being slaves. One wouldn't say that there was a general enfranchisement for voting. It was selective and skewed, but it provided the formation and the basis for struggle, for liberation, and for democratically elected representatives. And that is the struggle that has been going on since, or has continued since then, from independence to today. That freedom of expression, desire to become citizens rather than subservient serfs.
Would you say that power and that influence that they established at that time, do you think they still have that hold on us?
Well, even if they don't have the hold, they have maintained their interest in us. They are still one of our foremost partners in either international affairs, in commerce, in trade. We seek their education. We seek to speak their language intelligibly to them, which sometimes is not to most of our people. So our people have devised their own language, even though it is still English. It's the English that the Englishman will not understand. So they still have influence. Our literate and educated teachers, professors, and executives in the private sector are mostly trained and influenced by the English culture.
For the 23 years that you were in the military, what would you say are the landmark achievements of the military during that period?
Well, the one landmark is that we are still one country, united in diversity, struggling within the diversity, hoping to improve and become one of the foremost civilized nation and leadership of the black race and of Africa. But the foremost achievement is that we have been on the brinks of collapse since the 1966 coup, which was the epitome of disagreements between the political parties, growing from the initial stages of the search for political power and political prominence and predominance. The three-legged regions produce competitive political atmosphere that was exploited by the various regions for their prominence. That has always bred some political conflicts between the regions, such that underneath there had been hope that the constitution will change. And it had changed because we had gotten to states. We are now 36 states and the federal capital in Abuja. But people are still not satisfied with that structure because of the distribution of power between the center and the regions, called the states now. And the feeling that there's still some inbuilt dominance of the North because of the size of the region, the growing population of it. So we've had changes, but it still has its inherent problems.
As an individual, what would you say are the accomplishments you made?
My landmark, from the point of view of being in the military, is one of loyalty, discipline, and leadership of those under me. Leadership that encourages ethics and codes of the military and of good citizenship as a Nigerian, and loyalty to the Nigerian state as constituted by law, and in consistency with my oath of being a regular combatant officer. I was retired as 37. Life goes on. Life has gone on. And we thank God we can count ourselves as being lucky to be alive at 80.
You were in the security and still very active, even though you don't want to admit it. I want to believe that you're still in touch with your military training and experience and the knowledge you garnered while you were there. Now, given present day realities of insecurity, that's pervaded the nooks and crannies of the country, what will be your golden formula in addressing and resolving these issues?
Good governance has a lot of input. If you make the laws, you should make them obedient and enforce them. And nobody is above the law.
What will the Nigeria of your dream be like? Can you just indulge us?
Well, it's not easy to spell out the various dreams one has. Over and above all, one would like to see Nigerians having a smile on their face.
You seem to have a distinct relationship with the media. And I want to believe it goes way back to when you were the Federal Commissioner for Information and Culture.
Yes, well, if I understand what you mean by stint, is that maybe I am a fake journalist, having been the Minister for Information and Culture. But I think having to do with the information of Nigeria at a very critical time. Nigeria has always been critical, even during the Civil War, immediately after. But at this particular time, it was as if we were riding on the crest of revolution, and revolutionary instant decision and action. As they used to say, with immediate effect. And I know the then head of state was leading diplomatic decisions which were making the headlines with respect to Angola, apartheid and so on. And I was a minister during these um, revolutionary decisions. So we wanted to consolidate our internal domestic information system and to strengthen the ideas of getting Nigerians to know what is going on as at when it happens, um, rather than wait for the foreign media to take the information space and then we track behind to either deny or confirm or repeat what they have said. So there was this new technology of the balloon, a military tested communication system. We didn't have the satellite then. Um, so we decided that to enjoy the benefit of technology then, we could employ this balloon terrestrial system with various stations around Nigeria so that information can be transmitted through the NTA and other communications could employ the system. So that motivated the idea that led to the centralization of the then existing television system, broadcasts in Nigeria, primarily the Western Nigerian television service, the first in Africa. And in doing so, we had to take over those stations as a federal controlled television stations. So the same way Kaduna Television and any other that came into the stream. And the intention there was not to play the second fiddle as we were to other foreign television stations. In fact, we were very much inspired to create or centralize influential media. So, New Nigeria, Daily Times were more or less taken over for federal control. Similarly, in our bid to ensure that we are not left behind with the dissemination of information, we championed the creation of this agency of Nigeria. Again, the print world and the practice of journalism was so free that we sought to say, well, we should have some say in those who practice journalism. It should not be free for all. So we got into the dialogue and sometimes conflict with, may he so rest in peace, Pajagande, His Excellency, and others were in the field because we had advocated that there should be registration of journalists who rightly can practice journalism in Nigeria.
Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with the state of the media, the Nigerian media, as we have it today?
No. One cannot be satisfied because there are so many challenges. Fake news, there are impostor journalists, and there has been growth in strengthening the practice of journalism, but we still have here and there reporters who are either dissatisfied or disgruntled or not strong to write reports on issues which they are reporting. But we have gotten we have gotten to where we can count ourselves as uh, acting in the field of journalism that make an impression. And I must note, NTA has been playing a remarkable role even in this democratic dispensation.
One question I'd like to ask is, how do you keep that wheel of intellectual proficiency going? What is it? What's the oil? What's the secret? The secret oil using, greasing that wheel of your intellectual proficiency.
It's a global world. Anything that happens in America, the drop of the pen, you can hear what has happened and the analysis. So you have time. If you have time, you have health. And of course, you have the opportunity to be able to afford it because it's getting more expensive. However, I was a farmer. In fact, I was a chicken farmer. I think I became a chicken farmer long before His Excellency Obasanjo did. But while I was farming, I applied to Ahmadu Bello so that I could be an educated farmer, a well-oriented farmer in modern terms. But my application to read agriculture was changed to law. And I regarded it as article of faith. I took up the admission, did 3 years in A.B.U, 1 year in law school, Lagos, and became a lawyer. And subsequent to that, attorney public, Rotary attorney. No regrets. I set up a practice because I couldn't be admitted in any of the established law firms. Not that I didn't try, but I tried. Noticed there was some reluctance for one reason or the other. So I set up my own practice and I got young lawyers who are practicing with me.
Which is the most shocking adjustment you've had to make?
And the only shocking adjustment that I've had to make in my life was being retired abruptly and having to become a civilian and Berkshire citizen. And having grown in the military from the age of 14, it was hard because I'd acquired family and children who had to adjust. Not just me adjusting, but they too had to adjust.
When you went searching for love, you didn't just restrain yourself to the northern part of Nigeria where you come from. You traveled across the Niger and to different parts of Nigeria to go seek for love. What do you really inform that?
As soon as I started my first posting to the Ordnance Depot in Yaba on Clifford Street, I met my love there, a very young girl who had left the teaching hospital in Ibadan where she was training to be a nurse. She happens to come from a Mere family in Thecla Street in Owerri. So we fell in love and got through the processes and got married.
You didn't stop at Anambra. You didn't stop there.
Well, yes, I've extended my my lease of family, which is recommendatory as a Muslim. Yes, I've had 4 wives. The first one from Owerri, the second one from a crossbreed of Delta and Lagos. The third one is Afamai. The fourth one is Plateau. Unfortunately, it's only the first one that has passed on. The others are still around. We're still doing our own thing.
Can you shock me with one thing that you do now that, defy age and imagination?
One what? One what?
Can you surprise Can you surprise me? Just tell me something, that you do that defies age and the imagination.
Well, I'm still competent,
Oh.
but not available. I still admire life. I still admire ladies. But nowadays, the admiration does not go too far.
But when you told me that you could play golf, I had to take a second look at you. I'm like, how do you do that?
Well, because on the how, I'm aided by playing on the cards. Unlike before, that I could walk 36 holes a day on my feet and still have a good sleep thereafter.
How would you describe yourself? I like that chuckle.
How would I describe myself? I have kept a very difficult path to keep in Nigeria. Loyalty, integrity, proficiency, learning and increasing one's capacity, and watching and learning how things are evolving.
Once a general, always a general. He's the chairman of our board of trustees of the I.B.M, Golf and Country Club. And he's very active. And he's a man what is weight in gold. And frankly, these are people who have stood for this country and are still standing in a forthright manner to see that Nigeria is given the right leadership and everybody has their rights protected. And it's a man who has paid his dues and served this Nigeria meritoriously. He's a great hero.
He's a simple man, God-fearing, and I think I can safely say that he's someone who, when he makes a friend, means the friendship. He's the type of man that if you play golf with someone, you get to know them. In all the sports I've taken part in, I think golf is the most revealing of character. And it reveals a lot about people's character. Haruna is someone that you get to know as you play golf with him. When you meet someone and they are totally different from the perception you have, the image you have of them, you get a mild shock. And then it takes a while to adjust to the new image. But over the years, you come to know the person better. And as far as my relationship with him is concerned, I have not had any disappointment at all. He's not let me down in any way. I've been able to see him. I've been to his home. I've traveled with him. He's a gentleman. I don't usually go on and on about. I'm a journalist, and I'm sure that You understand me when I say that? We journalists were sarcastic, distrustful. We are negative in many ways about people. So when you do approve of someone, that person is got to be really someone who has impressed you. He's one of those who have impressed me.
He's a very nationalistic person, in spite of some of the impressions people have of him, maybe because of some of the way Nigeria has turned now. I can tell you, at the time I came to his chambers, there were Abegunde, who was a Yoruba man, who was head of chamber, had just left. Elizabeth Ashia Kanjo, and a team lady, was head of chambers. Biola Yebanji, a Yoruba man, was in chambers. John Balami from Adamawa was in chambers, and the others there. Hardly any. The secretary was an Igbo woman. His accountant was an Igbo man. His driver, Malam Buba, was from Okepas, Borno State. But he had a Nigerian office. Our front desk man was from Plateau, Israel Abu. So he was a man who embraced Nigeria and who was very comfortable in all parts of Nigeria. And he's a man who's widely traveled, who has commitments and friendships across the country, and who has contributed his own bit massively to the development of this country.
Dad is the kind of person that needs to instill discipline into his children. Uprightness, honesty, truthfulness. Now, for those of us who are his children, when we were younger, we thought it as being harsh, because we're children. But as time goes on and you grow up, you begin to understand the advantages of his being rigid and stern in some instances. You now realize the advantages of him not being too sweet, nice, to you when you're younger. Would I say part of experience, as you grow older, you begin to realize things you shouldn't do and things you should do, which would be to your benefit. So in earnest, he's a nice dad, he's a nice person, humble, and a father to have.
And you just share one of your favorite quotations with
Live
us.
and let's live.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
Okay. He just told us his favorite quotation, which is live and let's live. And so simple, but at the same time very instructive. Live and let's live. Love thy neighbor as you love thyself. And so on that note, we want to say thank you so much for sharing your perspective on Nigeria from yesteryears until now. It's really been a conversation with history with you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your perspective.